So, due to unforeseen circumstances, I am going to complete my end of July and August blog via video for you guys. I had originally intended to just write everything out, kind of return to my roots where I started with just writing. However, it does take a lot longer than you kind of expect it to take, especially when you don't have a lot of time. Like, I can only write really like 5-minute increments here and there. So in that case, it just takes forever to actually complete a blog, and there was a lot of information, a lot of things that I did towards the end of July to tell you about. And I just haven't had a lot of time recently to sit down and write for you guys. So I thought I would just get all of this out there for you now, and then we can just put it on the blog. The first half is obviously on the blog with the pictures. So I'm going to be starting out here on July 22nd, which was just over a month ago, so I think it's about time. So on the 22nd, my parents and I were spending our first full day in Xi'an. We started out the day really early. Ended up skipping breakfast, which was stupid. We did that a lot. But we had to go find some money first. Our hotel was actually in a really cool little area. Very, very Chinese. Very hard bed and everything. But it was right near one of the street markets. So it wasn't very far from one. It was like right at the end of the main Muslim quarters, which is a very famous cultural street in Xi'an. You can get lots of different kinds of foods, and you can get little trinkets and things. So we were really close to a lot of really cool things. We were actually not very far from the Great Mosque either, which we didn't end up finding until our last day there. But so we were quite central, and there were no bank machines around us. There was one, and it would only accept my Chinese debit card. It wouldn't take my parents' card. So we ended up going there because I had to get some cash out so we could take a taxi so that we could go to the Terracotta Warriors. On the way to the Terracotta Warriors, I was talking to my parents, and they were saying they had this like really weird sleep. It was like hot, and then they'd be cold, like, comfortable, and then really hot again. And I was saying, like, "Oh, your air conditioner is broken then." Like, "Oh no, we didn't." Like, I don't know. And so like when we got back to the hotel, I realized that I had forgotten to mention to them that the air conditioners here in China, you have to turn them on using a little remote control, and they never knew that, so they didn't turn their air conditioning on. So they didn't have any air conditioning the first night, and that was my fault. But so we got into taxi, we got to the Terracotta Warriors. I had been given the recommendation that we get there right for when it opens, and I absolutely agree with this. I recommend this to everybody and anybody who decides to go to see the Terracotta Warriors. So it opens at 8:30. There were a lot of people waiting there, even for being quite early in the morning. However, a lot of the tour groups, when they first go in, they don't go pit 1, 2, 3. They tend to go, I think it was pit 2, 3, and then 1, something like that. So we got there right before it opened, got our tickets right when the ticket booth opened, and then got in when we were some of the very first people in. And the entire grounds, you have to walk quite a bit through these gardens to get to where the sites are. The site is divided into 3 different pits that are in these gigantic buildings. And then there is a museum, and I think there was another building, but we never ended up making it into there. We ended up going to pit number 1 first. So if we did that, it was really cool because there were very few people in there. My grammar is absolutely terrible, by the way. The longer I've lived in China and the longer I teach ESL, my grammar is just horrendous. It's poor. It's really bad. So I apologize in advance for the many grammatical errors that I may have already made and that I definitely will be making. So blanket apology in advance for all of you. Anyway, so we get into pit number 1. Being some of the first people in there, and the fact that we didn't follow what was recommended by tour groups and things, we got to see, like, I actually have a picture I took, the entire pit completely unobstructed. There were no people in front of us. It didn't last for very long. They all sort of started to file in after we stood there for a little while. But we got to see the entire pit without anybody there, which was really neat. So the first pit, that's the one that was the original discovery. And what's kind of cool is when you walk along the sides, there's all these little signs with correlating numbers throughout the pit, so you can have like little pieces of information, facts that you can read. For example, one of the pieces of information was right near the beginning. There was a piece of the wall and part of the well where the farmer was drilling. So that's how the terracotta warriors were discovered. Was this farmer was just drilling a well and came across all of these terracotta warriors, and so it's kind of interesting. But that was one of the facts that you were reading, that there's a piece of the well where he was digging and where he found the wall. The first pit itself has about 6,000 terracotta warriors, though there were only about, I think, 1,000 of them that were actually unearthed that we got to see. From there, we ended up going into pit number 3, I believe, first. It took us a while to walk through. Like, we took our time reading everything and taking pictures. So by the time we got to pit number 3, now, pit number 3 is the smallest of the 3 pits. And there were a lot of people. It was a really tight space. But it's quite small. Like, when you're looking at it, you wouldn't believe there's like 68 different warriors in there and 4 horses. And you would not believe that there was that many warriors just looking at it, because it's quite small. And they were saying that they thought it was like the command center. So all of the pits kind of have this opening that goes down. There's like a bit of a tunnel leading down. So they've obviously had to dig down before they placed the terracotta warriors in, and then the earth slowly built up over top of them over time. So we had to dig down even further to find the opening. But right from the very first opening, there are 4 horses, and then there was like a big block in the center. And on one side, there were a bunch of terracotta warriors that hadn't been fitted together yet, and then on the other side, they were assembled. So it was actually really interesting, because you could see kind of the process of how they were found and then what they look like now that they've been repaired. So then from pit number 3, we went over to pit number 2. While we were there, I found a site on my phone, and I was reading about the different pits, so that we kind of had an idea, like what we had seen, we were going into, because we didn't want to pay for a tour guide. So we just did it on our own. Before we got to pit number 2, I was reading that like this is the most spectacular of the pits, and it was really cool, and like even better than pit number 1, which was massive, and it's really cool because that's what all the pictures are taken of. So it's kind of neat getting to see that. And pit number 2 was pretty cool, I will admit. I don't think it was as spectacular as pit number 1, at least not for me. If you are into archaeology, though, pit number 2 would probably be the place that you would like to go. It's still being unearthed, so there's actually like still excavation going on. Sometimes while you're there, we actually got to see people at the very end of their shift before they went on break, kind of putting things away. But pit number 2, apparently there are like 1,300 terracotta warriors in there, but they are supposedly some of the the best preserved ones, even though they haven't been unearthed yet. That's what they were kind of saying, that they were pretty sure that these were the best, the most preserved, and some were in bronze, and it had all different positions, and they managed to excavate a couple of the different positions, and they put them on display on the side so you could kind of see what there were. So there were some archers in there, and then they had the different fighters in different poses. So that was kind of interesting getting to see that. When we came out, we went and got some water. It took us forever to find the place where you could actually buy something there. It's the first time I've ever been anywhere in China where there is not really one solid like convenience store or the tourist trap store, I guess. Like, there was nothing. It was really hard to find that. It was kind of interesting. And then we had to wait for a little while. There was a big unveiling of some kind at the museum, there was all these people talking, and they talked forever. It felt like they talked forever, at least. And then we couldn't use the front door to get into the museum. This is where the bronze statues were, the bronze horses, which is something that, I mean, you read about it, it's kind of cool, and you want to see it. So we waited around, and then we found out we had to go through the back door to get in. Couldn't go through the front for some reason. Overall, we spent a good couple hours at the Terracotta Warriors, maybe like 3. And then headed back out. On the way out of the Terracotta Warriors, you had to take a different path out, and that's where all of the tourist trap stores would be. And I say would be because most of them are empty currently. It's just a bunch of empty buildings that you have to walk past that are still under construction. Nobody's there. And again, not a single bank machine. We did manage to find one, and it wasn't plugged in. It wasn't working. So here we are, the Terracotta Warriors. We have no money between the 3 of us. We need money in order to eat because we're hungry now. Though Mom wasn't feeling well that day. And we need money to get a taxi to go home. So we wander around, walk past all these booths with all this food that smells really good. We want to try it all. No way to buy anything. Finally, they keep coming up to you. These tour guides will keep coming up to you, asking you, like, English, you want English tour guide? So we asked this woman, like, we need a bank machine. She kept telling us to go to this one. Well, it's not working. Like, it's not plugged in. I don't know what information you've been given. So she suggested that we go to this one just kind of off the side. It was actually more in town than it was in the Terracotta Warriors park itself. But really close. So we walked out, found this machine. It ate my card. So then we had to sit in the bank and wait. Thankfully, the bank was open, and we had to wait for these people to get my card out of the machine. Apparently, the machine had already eaten another card, and the card got stuck at the top. So my card went in. I was able to get money out, and then my card wouldn't come out because now there's 2 cards in the machine. And the money came out of my account, so it was interesting. I didn't know that machines could do that, but apparently they can. And then of all things, I have all this cash now, and I don't want to carry all of it in my little wallet, so I take a chunk of it to put it in my little passport book so I can slip that in my bag. I had 100 kwai in my passport book, so we could have gotten food this entire time. I had no idea I had this money. But anyway, so we go back and we go grab a lamb skewer. I will admit, I'm not a huge fan of lamb. The first time I ever had it, nobody told me what I was eating, and I thought it was really bad beef, like the beef had gone sour and probably should have been thrown away and not eaten. It turns out it was lamb, and I'm not a huge fan. However, the lamb skewers in Xi'an are really good. They are spiced really nicely, so I recommend trying it whether or not you like lamb. If you eat meat, go for it. I also really like grilled corn here in China. The corn, though, in Xi'an is very different from Guangzhou. There is no spice. It is very dry. Like, there's no moisture left in it. It was really disappointing. I was so disappointed because I kept telling my dad, like, I know, he was a little concerned about some of the food. The corn is really good. I love the grilled corn. I love barbecue corn. We never ended up getting the barbecue corn that I really like, which I'm really sad about. He never got to try that, and he only got to try this really terrible dry corn, which I was kind of sad. So then we only had the one full day in Xi'an. So when we left the Terracotta Warriors, we found a taxi. The taxi ride back, I forgot about that. That's a memory I tried to block, apparently. The taxi driver, so I wasn't thrilled about the one we got. When we first got in the taxi, I was kind of thinking, like, we should have walked a little further to find a taxi. I don't trust this one, but we ended up getting in anyway. He had no idea where he was going at all. So it took him a little while to figure it out, how to even get back into town, because the Terracotta Warriors aren't actually in Xi'an. They're outside of Xi'an. I think it took about 40 minutes by taxi to actually get there. So he had to figure out how to get back into the city by GPS. I mean, you live here. You're parked outside of a major tourist place. I would assume you would maybe live in Xi'an, right? Or at least have driven there multiple times to take tourists back to hotels. White or Chinese, you know? No, so he had to look up where he was going on his GPS. We finally get there, and he is taking this long, backwards way. I have no idea where the hell he's going. I'm looking at maps on my phone. It's weird. I don't know where we are. He's taking a different entrance. Because Xi'an itself, there's a bit of like an outer city, but where our hotel was, we were actually in the original city of Xi'an inside the wall. So the city itself is walled, and then there's this like urban sprawl that's developed outside of the city that still would technically be part of Xi'an. Though our taxi driver the night before who brought us from the train station was very adamant that we were not actually in Xi'an until we got to the wall. So it took us forever to figure out where the hell we were. It was really annoying. And at one point, I was showing him the directions, so he called the hostel, or the hotel we were staying at. So the woman called back, and she came and met us. Like, we weren't far from our hotel towards the end, but it was so incredibly frustrating. He was getting frustrated, and it was to a point where it's like, if you are going to charge us any more, drive around, like, I'm not paying you. So when the meter hit the amount that we had paid to get to the Terracotta Warriors, I just stop. Like, we're getting out. Here's the money. Take it, leave. Like, I don't want to be around you anymore. Oh, I was so frustrated with him. Anyway, so we got back to the hotel and we realized this is our last day. Like, it's our only full day, and there's so much to see in Xi'an. So there's no relaxing this day. We have to get it all in. We start walking towards the bell tower. Now, in Xi'an, in the walled city, there is the bell tower and the drum tower. The bell tower, I believe, was the one who went off every half hour. So it went off every hour, but at the half hour, so like 7:30, 8:30, 9:30. And then the drum tower used to go off every hour, on the hour. It was just a way for the city to be able to tell what the time was. They don't do anything like that anymore. However, they now have shows at that time. So we missed the one at the bell tower. We ended up, when we finally got to the drum tower, we managed to spend enough time wandering around that we were there in time for the drum show. So that we got to see. But it was really neat seeing it. Like, it's not something that would need to spend a lot of time in. And you have to go under an underground pass in order to get the tickets, and then to get into the bell tower, because they're kind of now roundabouts. So there's a lot of traffic surrounding it. You have to go under in order to get up. And like I said, they were really neat to see, but you didn't have to spend a lot of time in either of the towers. But it was part of the culture. It's something that everybody tells you should see, and they are very neat. Like, the architecture is really beautiful. Some of the information that we got when we were there was really interesting. Mostly the keeping time, I guess. The show, I think, would have been really cool to see if we had been there in time. So from the bell tower, we figured out how to get to the drum tower, wandered over that way. We stopped for some coffee on the way, which was very much needed, and ended up at the drum tower. And one of the cool things is, around the drum tower, everything is shaped like a drum of some kind. So, like, there was a little, I guess, concrete sitting area or park just next to the drum tower, and there were all these little pillars, and they were actually shaped like drums. So that was kind of neat. The drum tower is also right next to the entrance of the Cultural Street, which leads back to our hotel, which we found out as we were walking down the Cultural Street. We kind of knew our hotel was on the street, or we thought maybe it's a different street. We weren't sure. And we actually didn't figure out we were on the main cultural road that is so popular here until to that day on the 22nd. So we went to the Drum Tower, and then we decided to try and find the mosque. We walked around the top of the Drum Tower, looking around the surroundings. Like, you would assume you would see the top of the mosque, because I'm in our heads, at least we were thinking it's called the Great Mosque, so we're thinking like big mosque with the domed kind of roof. That's not what it was, and we didn't see one of those. No idea where we were going, so we just started walking. We walked quite a ways, and like I said, my mother was not feeling well, and it was hot. So at one point, it was kind of like, wow, well, maybe one more street, and then by the time we stopped and we still hadn't found the mosque, it was like, you know what? There was a sign for a temple this way down a little road. Let's just go there. Like, I don't care about the mosque right now. Maybe we'll find it tomorrow before we leave. So we ended up wandering down this little, kind of like a hutan area. So we in with all these little tiny stalls. And I found another Buddha board. I was so excited. I lost my Buddha board. I used to own a tiny little plastic one. And what they are, it's a tiny little board that you can paint on, but you can only use water. And so whatever you paint, it comes out black. And then when it dries, it actually fades. So it's like this little gray board. And it's the idea of Zen and nothing lasts forever, and appreciate what you have and all that other stuff. It was actually stolen in university, one of my first years or second year of university. So I've always been meaning to get another one because they're very relaxing. And I found the scroll one there, and it was really cheap. Everything in Xi'an was cheap for little tourist trinkets and things like that. So I grabbed one of those and a couple brushes, and I found these little musical instruments, which were really neat. They have, in China, they have the little, they're like stone flutes to an extent. They kind of look like a tiny little vase, and they have some holes in them, and you blow across like you would a flute. When we walked into the Drum Tower, there was a guy selling some, and he was playing it. Beautiful, such a beautiful sound, and especially with the resonance of the room that we were in. Found them. I do not sound like he did on this instrument. It will take me a while to figure out how to sound like he did, but I can make a sound on it, so that's something. So I grabbed a couple of those. We just kind of wandered around, then we found this temple. And we walked through the temple, and I mean, every temple, honestly, they all look very, very similar. And there was one moment, though, where we were standing there, and it was very quiet, and you could hear this noise. And it almost sounded like a giant singing bowl. And we're kind of looking around, it's like, I think that's a singing bowl. Like, that's really nice. It's very kind of relaxing. Like, I want to go see this. Where is this bowl? We're wandering around, and then we realized, as we got closer to the sound, that it was actually a washing machine that we had been hearing. And it was not a singing bowl. It was a washing machine. So that was kind of a letdown. After that, we decided we're going to head back. We'll take the cultural street and walk back towards the hotel, because we knew our hotel was in that direction. So we get onto the cultural street, and it is crazy. It is not a pedestrian street. There is a lot of people on the road, but it is not an actual pedestrian street. So you have to watch out for cars, like bikes. Not a lot of cars drive down there. I would definitely not want to if I lived there, because there are a lot of people wandering around. But you have to watch out for bikes and things like that. And lots of food, very similar food. It was like every other stand was selling the exact same thing. Lots of lamb. And we were kind of at a point where it's like I didn't really want lamb again. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan. The skewers were like great, but so we ended up having some potato. It's like this swirled potato on a stick. And my mother had, before she came to China, she had read about this bowl of lamb stew, essentially what you can get here. It's a really popular dish in Xi'an. It's supposed to be really good. What they do is they give you this bread, which is kind of doughy, like it doesn't taste like it's fully cooked. You rip it up yourself into your bowl, and then you give it back to them, and then they fill it with the lamb soup, and then they give it back to you. So it's essentially just like a lamb broth with pieces of lamb in it, and then your ripped up bread. So we tried that, and it was, I'll admit, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of lamb, and this one didn't have any spice to it, so it was just the flavor of the lamb. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. They have different versions. I think you could have gotten a beef one, and I think there was another one. Maybe it was chicken. There wasn't a lot of pork because there's a lot of Muslims in the area. So most of what you find there will either be lamb or beef. And there was a little bit of chicken, not as much chicken as that you find in Guangzhou. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So we had this soup. None of us were overly hungry, so we ended up just getting one bowl to just try it for all three of us, which was good because it was massive. It was a huge bowl, and like I said, my mom hadn't been feeling well, so she really didn't even eat a lot. So it was mostly my dad and I wasn't a huge fan of the lamb, so huge bowl of soup. We didn't end up finishing it. And as we were walking back towards the hotel, there was this cake thing that you kept seeing, and it looked really, really good. Like it looked like a sweet sticky rice on a stick. So I decided I had to try a piece, and I was a little disappointed. The very top was okay, like it was like a honey layer on the top. The rest, I think it was like a jasmine tea sticky rice, but it wasn't sweet. So it was not what I expected. It was very perfume-esque, I guess, because of the tea that they had used. So that was a little disappointing. So we got back to the hotel. We dropped off some of our stuff, and we decided we had to go see the wall. At night, they light the wall up. So we had to go find the wall. We wanted to go find a way to get onto the top because you can actually rent bikes, and you can ride all the way around the city wall, that's really cool. Like that's something that would be fun to do. You have to at least get up on the top of the wall, and at night it would have been awesome. And I say would have been because we walked. It felt like quite a way to get to the wall from our hotel. And when we got to the wall, we had a decision to make. We could have turned left or we could turn right. We turned right. We should have turned left. We walked forever on the right, trying to find an entrance to get onto the top of the wall. There was no entrance because the entrance was in the corner of the wall. And if we had turned left, we would have gotten there within maybe 10 minutes. Very frustrating to find that out. Thankfully, we didn't find that out until the next day. So we walked quite a bit, and we ended up finding the exit to the wall. So we walked out of the city wall, and we got to see it all lit up from the outside. So we were actually sitting there at this park. Something that happens a lot in China, and this is everywhere in China, not as much in my area where I live in Guangzhou, but if you go further into, or outside, I guess, to the outskirts of the city or into Panyu, you'll see a lot of this in the parks. There is a lot of like a community feeling in China. So you'll see the old men get together and they're playing games, and families are playing badminton, and there's always dancing. A whole bunch of old women just get together and they dance to music. It's like when you were little, if you watch music videos and you memorize the dance to a music video and you and your friends got together and danced to that. Exactly like that. Just lots of old women dancing together in a park, and sometimes old men join them. And then you have little kids who, this is at like 10 o'clock at night, sometimes 11 o'clock at night. You're like, what are you doing awake? Like, what is your parent thinking? I personally would want you in bed by like 7 so that I can sleep. But you have all these little, like, 3, 4, 5-year-olds running around and playing, very family oriented. So we ended up at one of these kinds of parks, and all these people are doing all these different activities outside of the wall, and they're walking their dogs, and got to see the wall lit up. So that was kind of neat. The biggest downfall, I guess, was that we had to walk back to the hotel, and we were pretty exhausted by this point, but we couldn't just sleep on the street. So we walked back, and then we had to have separate rooms. There wasn't a room for 3 people in this place. So my parents had one downstairs, then I had to walk up 7 flights of stairs to get to my room. But that was okay. So that was the end of our first full and only full day in Xi'an. So the next day, we had discovered when we were walking around the night before to get to the wall, a sign that mentioned where to get to the mosque. And it was very close to our hotel, which was, again, there was a lot of moments like that in Xi'an where you're like, really? Really? Like, we walked an hour and we didn't find it, and it was like a 20-minute walk from our hotel. Like, really? Thank you, universe. Like, you could have mentioned this earlier. So we walked to the mosque and wandered around. It was really nice. It had a very similar feeling to the temple, but it was on all these different little sections. The last section, the actual mosque itself where they do their prayers, you weren't allowed in. They asked you not to go in. The one Chinese family went in anyway. And there was 3 old men that started doing like kung fu moves and posing in kung fu poses outside of this mosque, and there were a bunch of people gathered around taking pictures. It was a little weird. It was very China. So we did that, and on our way back to the hotel to grab our bags, because this was our last day, we were going to fly to Guangzhou that night. We grabbed what they call Chinese hamburger. Essentially, it's just a whole bunch of meat that has been essentially sitting in a crock pot. They chop it up and then they stick it in this toasted bread. It's really good. The ones here in Guangzhou, it's usually cooked with some peppers and a little bit of celery. Some places you get a little bit more vegetable than meat in your Chinese hamburger. But the one in Xi'an was just packed full of meat. It was really nice, really filling, and quite cheap. So we did that, grabbed our bags, checked out of the hotel, and decided now that we know how to get to the top of the wall, we've got to go to the top of the wall. Especially since we didn't have a whole lot else to do that day other than just go to the airport. So we went to the top of the wall. We had these giant backpacks on with everything in it, and then my dad has another bag, and my mom has another bag. We had a lot of stuff with us. It was really hot. Like, really hot that day. Found out afterwards, after my parents left, that while they had been here, we had like a heat wave go through China, and it was actually legitimately some of the hottest times that they had on record in like years. So you were just sweltering on top of this wall. You have no shade. You're exposed to the sun, and it was so hot. It was terrible. So we didn't last very long on top of the wall. We spent all this money just to kind of walk around, but that was fine. We did see a sign for a bank that my dad needed kind of across the way. So we knew the airport is outside of the city wall. So we wanted to go in that direction anyway. So we decided, well, let's walk towards that mall. We can go sit in the mall, have a coffee, we can get the money that we need, and just kind of relax. It took us forever to get to that mall. So we walked out, crossed a bunch of roads, and then by the time we were close to the mall, we realized there's no crosswalk. And we cannot find a pedestrian street anywhere. I think we may have found one. We walked down to look, and it didn't go anywhere. Like, it didn't look like it went anywhere. It went to another section with some stores, and nothing was open. And there must have been a pedestrian path in that other little section, but when you look down in this section, because you can kind of look down from the top, you didn't see the pathway. So there was no way to really know unless you walked all the way down with our heavy bags, walked all the way over, only to find out maybe we had to turn around. So we decided to just cross the street, which was slightly terrifying because there's no real lights and because it's a giant roundabout. Thankfully, there's a lot of cars, I guess, so they have to stop. They have no choice, and they can't hit you. So we made it across the road, got into the mall. Took us a while to find the money, and it turned out that it was a really fancy mall. We couldn't afford a lot in the mall. Like, this was the mall that you walk in and you're like, I can't buy anything here. There's Prada and Gucci, and like I can't afford this. This makes me feel poor. This mall makes me feel very, very poor. We did find a coffee shop, Pacific Coffee, so we put down our bags and we sat for a while because we're tired and we're hot and we just need to sit. So we sat there for probably a good hour and a half, and decided that we might as well just get to the airport at this point. We have a couple hours still, but there's no point in dragging this out. So we wander outside of the mall to try and find a taxi. We found these signs that actually said like taxis this way, and we got lucky because there was nothing there, and we actually managed to find a taxi that were letting people out right in front of us, essentially. So it only took us about maybe 10 minutes to find one, and it was probably a good thing we left when we did because of traffic and how far the airport actually was. It did take us a good chunk of time to actually get there, so it was pretty lucky that we left when we did. We did decide to go to Pizza Hut, of all things. So my parents got to try McDonald's and Pizza Hut while they were in China. The only thing missing was KFC, because those are the 3 most popular American food chains here in China. Like, they're everywhere. So, I mean, we even went to Starbucks. So we also did Starbucks. There is a Starbucks and a KFC on every other corner. Pizza Hut, I mean, they're everywhere, but there's not as many, I guess. McDonald's is also everywhere, but again, not as many. KFC is literally on every other street corner. Like, you'll see 2 KFCs within walking distance of each other. It's really weird that they love KFC here. I don't understand. It's not good. I mean, it's so greasy, but besides the point. So we go to Pizza Hut. We got this, it was a set menu for 3 people. And we were picking off the options. My mother's listening to all of them, and she's like, oh my God, like, really? Like,